What do you know about these artefacts and their origins?
So most of the collection that we have in the Great Northern Staterooms in terms of the armour weaponry was purchased mostly in the 1840s to the 1870s by the Earls of Warwick, mostly Henry and his son George Greville, typical Victorian Earls of Warwick. They're obsessed with Gothic architecture, they love the idea of romantic medieval history, and they had a medieval castle. So they thought, why not fill our medieval-looking Great Hall with medieval-looking weapons and armour? A lot of the collection was purchased at auctions, bought in bulk. So, for example, they go to London, if there's an auction going on for perhaps 20 to 30 sword hilts and blades, they'll just put a price offer in and then bring them back to the castle. Or they go on holiday. For example, they go on their grand tours to Italy, to France, to Germany, to Spain, and bring things back, whether it be a nice sword or a nice harness of armour, put it on display in your castle.
Brilliant, thank you. So what do you know about any of these artefacts' constructions?
So, not a huge amount. A lot of the constructions, we wouldn't really know much about them purely because they were brought as decorative items. We have to go with what we can see. So a lot of them will be bolted or later welded together by Victorian smiths or armourers. That's not what they were doing, unfortunately. Or the Grevilles would do it themselves. If they had, say, a pole arm head, they might just find around a bit of wood and just stick it onto it. That was quite common at Warwick Castle. Unfortunately, when it comes to the materials, I mean, we can tell things like, for example, if it's with iron or if it's steel or if it's welded in a certain way. We can probably see from that, but we rely mostly on outside experts. For example, these are all armories, they come to look at our collection. Perhaps Sotheby's, when they come to do our insurance, they'll look more closely at the items as well.
Okay. Is there a modern alternative to these materials, and if so, is it readily available?
I don't know. So, I mean, you see it all the time. Smiths and armourers making reproductions of these items, hardened steel, tempered steel. Whilst a lot of these processes weren't written down, just by looking at them, you can understand how they'd be made. And I think these days it's very possible to come very close to the real thing. In terms of replicas we have here, we actually have very close links to our replicas and our original items. We have an armourer that works in Nottingham, but he works for us freelance, and he makes replica weapons for us. I think it's very close to the real thing.
How are any of these artefacts hardened, if you know?
I wouldn't know the answer to that one. I'll have to ask the armourer.
What are your thoughts on reproductions of historical artefacts?
All for it. I think it's brilliant. I think in terms of education, it's perfect. I mean, if you come to, say, a castle or a stately home, you see these things on the wall or in glass boxes or display case, and you think, oh, there's always questions of how much does it weigh? Is a sword heavy? Can it be used properly? And yeah, you can't take things off a wall to try, but with a replica, it's the next best thing. And especially for children, it gets them thinking, it gets them understanding what it may have been like to be a knight or perhaps a soldier centuries ago.
Do you believe that reproductions have a place in academia? And if so or not, why?
I think they do, especially for the study of medieval arms and armour in particular. Again, the processes weren't often written down. It's by just looking and studying and researching that we can ascertain how to make these things. And I think for academics in particular, it's very helpful. I suppose a good example is when they found Richard III, looking at what killed him. And whilst they can't find the actual weapon that killed him, just from his wounds they can tell, he was killed by one of these things. And they can perhaps recreate the bill or a warhammer or a pole axe, and then go, this is what actually did the deed of killing a famous king of England. And it's not just him, you could just look at the skulls and wounds of many people, and that way you can then learn not just about how weapons are made, but how society was, especially in times of war centuries ago.
So what place do you think that reproductions have in academia?
I think, again, from an educational point of view, it's getting that hands-on experience, but also from an accessibility point of view. If you have someone that, say, is blind or has a vision impairment, rather than trying to describe what a sword is, you could literally let them hold it. And if it's a reproduction, it doesn't matter. If it gets damaged, you can then reproduce it again.
So as a curator or historian, what usage would you put a reproduction to?
From my day-to-day life at the castle, we always put it towards talks, tours, reenactment, and accessibility. We get a lot of children that come to the castle, hundreds of thousands of people a year, and rather than saying to a kid, "Oh, there's a sword, it weighs this much," to actually give them a sword and say, this is how much it weighs, and they can feel it, it really brightens their day. And I think it just gives the general public in particular a better understanding of what life was like centuries ago, as opposed to seeing things on TV shows or movies that aren't entirely accurate. When you come into a castle or a historic building and you can actually feel the history in your hands, it really does make a difference to their day and to our day.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
My pleasure.